steel bunkers might have been designed to withstand almost anything, but they stood no chance against fire from above. Through the crosshairs of my gun sight, I watched in grim fascination as streams of burning, thickened gasoline poured downward, like a living thing, wrapping itself around walls, crawling into corners, and clinging to everything it touched, stone, steel, and human flesh alike. The Japanese had built these strongholds with care, ensuring they could repel artillery shells, rifle fire, and even aerial bombs to some extent. But nothing in their training or preparations could have readied them for this new form of destruction. The flames behaved like a living predator, flowing through gun slits, pouring into tunnel entrances, and swallowing entire fortifications until they glowed like the furnaces of a crematorium. I was at the controls of a Vought F4U Corsair, flying with the 214th Marine Fighter Squadron. It was the Philippines, 1945, near the end of a long and bloody war, but the enemy's resistance was still fierce and unyielding. We had faced countless battles, but this mission would mark a turning point not just for us, but for the very nature of warfare. The morning of March 15th began like many others on Morro Airfield. The coral runway shimmered under the brutal tropical sun, and heat waves danced above the ground. Our mechanics moved from plane to plane, checking oil levels, arming weapons, and securing every last bolt and wire. We pilots went through our routines with the calm focus of men who had done this 100 times before, yet an unspoken tension hung in the air. We knew something was different. Major William Hayes, our squadron commander, called us together. Hayes was a seasoned veteran, his face weathered by months in the Pacific, his eyes holding that distant, haunted look we'd all come to recognize. He didn't waste words. He told us we were heading for a heavily fortified Japanese position. In the hills north of Manila, it was no ordinary stronghold. It was a complex network of concrete bunkers, steel reinforcements, and interlinked tunnels, expertly positioned to control the approaches to the capital. Artillery had pounded it for days without making a dent. Every previous attempt by the 37th Infantry Division to take the ridge had ended in disaster. Hayes let that sink in, his gaze sweeping over the 23 pilots gathered before him. Then he told us what made today different. Each of us would carry 2 600-pound tanks of napalm under our wings, jellied gasoline that would burn at more than 2,000 degrees and cling to anything it touched until it was reduced to ash. We would fly low, under enemy anti-aircraft fire, and release our bombs directly onto the bunkers. The burning gel would pour into every crack, tunnel, and gun pit. Nothing inside would survive. The plan was brutal, but war had stripped away most illusions we'd once held. I felt an involuntary chill despite the heat. I had dropped high explosives before, watched them tear men apart, but this was something else entirely. I would be delivering a fire that burned people alive, where they stood. A part of me recoiled at the thought, but then I remembered Iwo Jima, just weeks earlier, and the faces of Marines I'd known who had died trying to take positions like this one. If this weapon could save even a handful of American lives, I would use it without hesitation. The Japanese 103rd Infantry Regiment had chosen their ground well. Their ridge positions overlooked the coastal road to Manila and allowed them to control the valley below. Each bunker was carved into solid rock, reinforced with thick layers of concrete and steel. Tunnels connected the positions so the defenders could move unseen, emerging from unexpected places when under attack. It was a fortress in every sense of the word. Hayes showed us aerial photographs and pointed out the smoke markers our ground forces would use to guide us in. The instructions were simple. Fly in low, drop the napalm, and get out before the flames could reach us. As we broke from the briefing, my wingman, Second Lieutenant Bobby Chen, joined me on the walk to the planes. Bobby was a quiet knight from San Francisco, a Chinese-American kid who had already earned the title of ace with 6 confirmed kills. His voice was low when he asked if I ever thought about what we were really doing up there. I told him I thought about home and about making sure our men got there, too. That seemed to settle it for him. Devil's Daughter, my Corsair, gleamed in the sunlight. Under her broad gull wings hung 2 massive napalm tanks, each one an unassuming metal cylinder filled with liquid fire. My plane captain, Chief Petty Officer Mike Kowalski, a Detroit native with years of experience, gave her a final inspection. He reminded me to pull up fast after releasing the bombs. Napalm fires could climb higher than most people imagined. I gave him a nod and began my pre-flight checks. The Corsair was a marvel, over 2,000 horsepower, built for speed, agility, and sheer power. Her distinctive wing design had earned her the nickname Whistling Death from the Japanese, and today, she would prove that name again. The engine roared to life beneath me, and the vibrations ran up through the seat, into my chest. Around me, other Corsairs came alive, their engines joining into one deep, rolling thunder. Hayes's voice came over the radio, calling us to form up. We took off one by one, the coral runway blurring beneath our wheels before the planes lifted. Into the bright blue sky, we fell into formation. 8 groups of 4 spread loosely to give us room to maneuver. Below, the dense jungle of the Philippines rolled by in endless shades of green, broken only by glints of winding rivers reflecting the morning sun. The 45-minute flight north passed in tense silence. When the target area came into view, I saw thick plumes of smoke rising from artillery strikes already underway. The ridge itself was hidden beneath the jungle canopy, but I spotted the white phosphorus smoke markers the forward observers had placed for us. Hayes's voice came through the radio again, steady and calm, reminding us to strike quickly and not linger. My pulse quickened as we descended. At lower altitude, I could see the enemy's cunning use of terrain. The ridge gave them complete control of the valley, and I caught glimpses of dark cave mouths and bunker slits cut into the hillside. Then, the air around us erupted in black puffs anti-aircraft fire. My Corsair jolted as shrapnel tore into her wings, but the engine stayed strong. To my left, Lieutenant Daniel O'Malley's plane took a direct hit to the engine cowling. Hayes ordered him to turn back, but O'Malley either didn't hear or didn't care. He dove straight at the enemy, his plane trailing smoke and flames. His bombs hit perfectly, detonating in a blinding flash of orange. The napalm spilled like molten lava down the hillside, snaking into bunkers and tunnels, transforming the stronghold into a raging inferno. Even from 1,000 feet above, I felt the wave of heat on my face. O'Malley pulled up, but his crippled engine gave out moments later. I watched helplessly as he tried to glide toward friendly lines. He didn't make it. The Corsair dipped, then nosed over into the jungle, vanishing in a fireball. The sight burned into my memory even as I pushed on with the mission. The ridge still stood before us, and the rest of us had our fire to deliver. Bobby. Single quotes as voice cracked through the radio, calling out to Danny, but I cut him off and told him to keep his mind on the job. My turn had come. I pushed Devil's Daughter into a steep 60-degree dive, the ridgeline swelling in my view with every second. The enemy had already spotted me. Tracer rounds clawed up toward my plane in glowing arcs, streaking the sky like deadly fireworks. Below, I caught sight of Japanese soldiers darting between bunkers, their dark uniforms stark against the flames already crawling over the hillside. At 1,500 feet, I hit the release and felt both napalm tanks drop away. I yanked hard on the stick, the sudden pull shoving me down into the seat as the Corsair strained upward. A moment later, the air behind me lit up. I heard the deep whoosh of the gel igniting, then the rapid staccato booms of ammunition detonating. In the heat, I twisted in my seat for a look and the sight clenched my stomach. The whole ridge was ablaze. The napalm rolled between rocks and over earth like liquid fire, spilling into caves and cracks, chasing down every hiding place. Men ran from the bunkers, some already burning, stumbling as the fire clung to their clothes and gear. Bobby's voice came through again, low and shaken, saying it looked like hell itself had opened on the hill. He wasn't wrong. The bunkers, that had shrugged off week after week of artillery fire, were now glowing like furnaces. The burning gel poured through their gun slits, filling the interiors with heat so fierce that the steel reinforcements glowed red. One after another. The rest of our squadron swooped in, adding their own loads to the inferno. The more we hit, the more the flames spread, until the whole mountaintop became a churning sea of orange and black. Anti-aircraft fire sputtered, then stopped altogether as their crews either died in place or fled. By the time Hayes called for us to head back, the ridge was nothing but smoke, flame, and ruin. It would burn for hours, maybe days. No one could have lived through that. We climbed into formation for the flight home. No one spoke much. We had lost O'Malley, and the image of men burning alive sat heavy in every mind. Still, the mission had been a success. The Japanese position that had stalled the Army's advance for weeks was gone in under 20 minutes. When we landed, Hayes gathered us for the debriefing. He looked at each of us with the flat, hard gaze of a man measuring the cost of war. 24 planes had left that morning, and 23 had returned. In the brutal arithmetic of combat, that was called a win. Reports from the ground confirmed it. The 37th Infantry Division had advanced without resistance. The ridge positions were gone. Hayes told us he understood the weight we carried. Napalm was a horrifying weapon. Its victims didn't just die, they burned in ways high explosives could never match. But every bunker destroyed meant fewer Marines facing machine guns at close range, fewer young Americans dying with a bayonet in their gut. I understood, though it didn't make the memory any less vivid. That night in my cot, I listened to the jungle sounds and thought about what we had done. War had always been about killing, but napalm was different. It was complete. Once it stuck to you, there was no escape. Over the next 2 weeks, we flew 17 more napalm missions across Luzon. The results never varied. Targets erased, resistance snuffed out entirely. Japanese fortifications that would have taken days and dozens of lives to breach with rifles and grenades now disappeared in minutes. Their bunkers became ovens, their tunnels, chimneys for the fire. Word spread quickly among the enemy. We intercepted radio traffic full of desperation. One message decoded by Navy intelligence stuck with me. An officer pleaded for permission to withdraw, saying the American firebombs made defense impossible. But orders from their high command were clear: fight to the last. Napalm made sure that the last came quickly and terribly. The weapon didn't just kill, it broke morale. Soldiers who had once faced artillery and gunfire with unshakable courage began surrendering when they saw our Corsairs diving in with napalm slung under their wings. I remember one airfield in particular. The Japanese had turned it into a fortress, digging bunkers and trenches right into the runway. They kept their real defenses hidden underground while lining up old Fighter Zeros and Oscars in plain sight as decoys. Against normal bombs, it worked. Against napalm, it didn't stand a chance. We came in low, and when the bombs burst, the fire swept over the entire airfield in one living wave. The decoys went up first, burning bright, but the true destruction came as the gel rolled into the trenches and bunkers. The fire was so hot it warped metal, melted aluminum, and consumed oxygen in the underground spaces. Those who weren't burned outright suffocated in the choking black smoke. The few who made it topside ran straight into the creeping fire. When the infantry moved in, they found more than 300 bodies, most unrecognizable. By April, napalm had become our main weapon for cracking defenses. The Japanese learned to fear the scream of our Corsairs in a dive more than any other sound. Our attacks didn't just kill the enemy, they saved Americans. Army units reported sharp drops in casualties when we provided napalm support. Positions that might have cost hundreds of lives to take by assault were erased in minutes from the air. My final napalm mission was on April 28th, against a command complex nearby. Intelligence had pinpointed it as the headquarters of the Japanese 14th Area Army, directing resistance across northern Luzon, built deep into solid rock. With walls more than 6 feet thick, it had shrugged off every conventional bombing attempt. From above, it was almost invisible, hidden among natural stone and thick jungle. Only the plumes from our marking rounds betrayed its location. This time, anti-aircraft fire was weakered. Too many of their gunners were already gone. We dove in hard and dropped the gel exactly where the smoke pointed. The napalm poured into the entrances and vents, hunting downward through the tunnels. Moments later, fire burst from every opening, driven by the air currents in the underground maze. The complex that had once been untouchable was now a furnace. Burning from the inside out, the rock turned a deep, glowing red from the extreme heat. Later reports confirmed that more than 200 Japanese staff officers were killed, and the entire communications hub for northern Luzon was wiped out. Without that command network, Japanese resistance in the area collapsed within days. On the flight back from that mission, I thought about what we had done with napalm. In less than 2 months, we had shattered Japanese defenses in the Philippines. Strongholds that might have withstood conventional attacks for months had been reduced to smoking ruins in mere minutes. The figures were staggering. Intelligence estimated that napalm strikes had killed over 15,000 Japanese troops during the campaign, while American losses fell to the lowest levels since the invasion began. The entire enemy regiments had been annihilated before they even had the chance to return fire, but the results were not only measured in numbers. Every pilot who flew those missions carried the memory of the terrible scenes they had witnessed. Napalm was a weapon that didn't just kill quickly, it killed in ways that were horrifying. The cries of men burning alive stayed with us long after the missions ended. Major Hayes addressed the unease one evening, reminding us that every enemy soldier killed with napalm was one less man who would fight to the death if we had to invade Japan. He believed it might save hundreds of thousands of American lives. He was right. The planned invasion, set for November 1945, would have caused enormous casualties for both sides. Each Japanese position destroyed by napalm was one less deadly obstacle for our forces to clear by hand-to-hand combat. The war ended before such an invasion was necessary. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender over the radio. As we listened in our ready room on Mindoro, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The killing was over. In the weeks before our return to the United States, I reflected on the role napalm had played. It had proven to be one of the most decisive weapons in the Pacific, forcing Japanese troops from their fortifications and hastening the end of the war. Yet it had also crossed a threshold in warfare, introducing a weapon that inflicted a uniquely cruel kind of death. The sticky, burning fuel, capable of reaching 2,000 degrees, was far removed from the cleaner, quicker deaths caused by bullets or shells. Even the Japanese recognized how devastating it was. In post-war questioning, senior commanders admitted that napalm was the most destructive weapon the Americans had used. One general stated plainly that there was no defense against fire from the sky. The records supported that claim. In the Philippines alone, over 200 fortified positions were destroyed by napalm, killing more than 20,000 Japanese soldiers, with almost no survivors from direct strikes. The weapon's kill rate approached 100%, something unprecedented. Just as importantly, American losses dropped sharply wherever napalm was employed, in some cases by more than 60%. the psychological impact was equally powerful. Troops who once fought to the last man against artillery and bombs began surrendering when napalm was used. Their belief in dying honorably inside strongholds shattered. In September 1945, as our transport ship left Manila Harbor, I stood on deck and looked back toward the jungle-covered hills. Scattered among them were the burned remains of countless enemy positions, silent evidence of what napalm could do. I thought about the thousands of men who had died in those infernos. They were courageous soldiers, fighting for their emperor, just as we fought for our country, but courage alone could not change the outcome. War is not decided by bravery, is decided by killing the enemy as effectively as possible. Napalm had done that with brutal efficiency. The weapon we used in the Philippines would be seen again in future wars, from Korea to Vietnam, and would remain in American arsenals for decades. What we proved in 1945 was that jellied gasoline could destroy any defense, no matter how determined the defenders. But it also marked the beginning of a path that would lead to even more terrible weapons, ones that could erase entire cities in seconds. Like the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. Those bombs were simply the next step in the same principle. Total destruction delivered from above. Watching the Philippines disappear into the distance, I felt the weight of what we had done. We had secured victory, saved American lives, and demonstrated America's military strength. But we had also shown the world that fire from the sky could render any defense useless. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson of the campaign. War was not about honor or glory, it was about winning, and that meant using weapons that killed quickly and completely. Napalm proved that jellied gasoline could achieve that better than anything before it. The Japanese soldiers who died in those bunkers had learned too late that their steel and concrete offered no safety from a weapon that burned like the sun and flowed like liquid. Their final moments marked a turning point in warfare, one that would influence military thinking for generations. As Lieutenant Jack Morrison of the 214th Marine Fighter Squadron, I had seen firsthand how a simple idea, thickened gasoline packed in metal canisters, could break the will and strength of an entire army. In doing so, it had likely saved more American lives than any other weapon in the Pacific. That was the true legacy of napalm in the Philippines, not just the thousands who died, but the thousands who lived because those strongholds were destroyed. In the unforgiving logic of war, that trade was more than acceptably, it was necessary and decisive. The fortifications the Japanese believed would shield them had proven worthless against fire from the air. Napalm had made it clear that modern war favored the side that could deliver destruction most effectively, regardless of how well the enemy prepared. That truth, learned in the burning hills of the Philippines, would shape the battles of the future. As our ship carried us home, I realized we had not only won a war, we had changed the way wars would be fought, ushering in an era where overwhelming force from above could decide the outcome before the enemy even had the chance to fight back. The defenders in those steel bunkers were the first to learn that reality. They would not be the last. In the end, napalm was more than just a weapon. It was a turning point. It saved lives on one side while taking them in the most brutal way on the other. It forced the world to realize that the future of warfare would be decided not by the courage of soldiers in the trenches, but by the ability to unleash unstoppable destruction from the skies. The battlefields of the Philippines proved that no fortress, no matter how strong, could withstand such firepower. But with that victory came a lasting truth. Once such weapons are used, the world can never return to the old ways of war. What began as a tool to win one campaign became a symbol of how modern conflict had changed forever.